Lawyers, what's the least defendable case you've worked? A woman wanted me to sue her previous lawyer for charging her a lot of money, but producing almost no work to justify his fees. She gave me what she told me was the lawyer's total work product, a page printed off the internet for which she said she was charged thousands of dollars for legal advice. She had already brought a claim via my jurisdiction's disciplinary body for lawyers. She had lost and wanted to bring an appeal. The judgment kept referring to documents that I hadn't seen. I pushed her to give me everything, and she came in with multiple files full of immaculate legal work that totally justified the fee she was fighting. We told her to get lost, but she wasted a lot of my time before we realized she was full of crap. So this guy ordered a pizza. Nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done under 30 minutes, but the guy assumed it because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later, and to apologize, even if it wasn't necessary, they brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he is Hindu, doesn't eat beef, and apparently felt offended. Also, this one time this dude wanted us to sue his neighbor because he assumed the guy was practicing black magic. A lady was sacked by a large company. They had caught her embezzling money to fund a gambling habit. They had clear evidence the embezzling had occurred, and she did not deny it. She sued the company for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm represented the company against this woman. The case was so easy, the firm gave it to my sister as her first ever solo attempt. My sister screwed it up badly. Not only did she lose, the court awarded the woman $500,000 instead of the $300,000 she asked for. In the end, it was a good career move. The partners all knew her name and dropped into her office, one by one, to offer their sympathy. Not my client, but my dad, and the hospital he worked at, was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Details: patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed, but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that, or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery, performs it successfully, hooray. The patient's husband is quite devout and beyond pissed that his wife can't have any more kids. So he sued the hospital. No firm would represent him, and he ended up bringing proceedings himself. Went all the way to trial, and he lost hard. My dad had a client who was on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. Guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook holding guns, drugs, and cash, and had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun as well as selling crack on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling the genius he was going to prison either way and to plead out for a reduced sentence, dude still pleaded not guilty. We still occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. Worked in-house for a famous character company with a large fan base. A few crazes a year call in. A guy called in claiming that we stole characters that he created and demanded to be compensated. I calmly ask them to provide more details so I can determine whether this has any merit to it. He states he designed the characters himself and gave it to the well-known actual creator when he was a kid, and the creator pawned them off as his own. I asked him when he was born, and it's a good 20 years after these characters were actually created. I ask him to explain this, and he pivots and says he also created some other well-known famous characters and brands. Characters and brands that are not owned by my company. I kindly ask that if he wants to pursue anything to send us something in writing and hang up. I figured if he wasn't going to do some really basic research on his own claim, he wasn't going to spend any time to write it up. Never heard from him again. Not a lawyer, I was a jailer and used to pull double duty as a bailiff. A guy stole a pickup truck and was later captured passed out behind the wheel, parked on a sidewalk surrounded by a ludicrous amount of drugs and guns. His legal defense? He elected to represent himself because he wasn't done being stupid. Double jeopardy. You can't charge me for theft, drugs, and felon in possession of a weapon because I've already been convicted all of those charges before. In short, during his jury trial he admitted to doing it, but explained with a smug grin that since he had already done time for the same charges from another case before, that he could not be prosecuted for them ever again. This is not how double jeopardy works, folks. He's in prison for 20 years now. If he'd taken legal counsel, he could have easily cut a deal for 5. Not a lawyer, but a rhymer trades union representative. At the last company I worked, we had a great set of workers. My colleague was the head representative for the union at the time, whereas I was still learning to be a representative. Anyway, we had this electrician who'd worked at the company for 25 plus years. Really well respected, but his views are a little out there. My colleague had just got him back to work after a case of inappropriate workplace behavior, kissing an office member of staff on the cheek, where he was suspended for 6 months whilst investigations went ahead. He came back with a final written warning, meaning one more incident, and he was sacked. All his pension, benefits, gone. 2 days after he came back, me and my colleague got asked to come into a meeting regarding this employee. Got in the meeting, senior HR and the boss of the company are sat inside. They lay out new allegations. So we have had a report that when working in a property, you went into the house when there was only a 14-year-old girl and then proceeded to talk to her about sex, condoms and other obscene matters we won't mention. So we are just like, whoa, wait, what the heck, we need to talk to our colleague and find out what's happened here and give him advice. Nope. Before we even had a chance to do that, the guy spoke up and went, yeah, I did. Nothing wrong with that. She's 14. She knows how to use a condom. She's from the area. That's all they know how to do. They have sex and get pregnant by 16. So I'm just talking to her about what she knows. Dude was in his late 50s, he should know better. Both me and my colleague just stunned, like why the freak did he just say that? Anyway, he got suspended and asked us to defend him because he says he did nothing wrong. We got the case file and evidence through, realized that there was actually freak all we could do. He dug his grave, dug it a day after he returned to work. He lost everything, his house, pension, everything. No one would employ him as he was deemed too risky to take on, knowing they could have a potential sex scandal should he do it again. I read a patent and told my bosses it was both invalid and infringed by no one. It had terms for element in each patent claim that no one would practice or that weren't supported in the written description. Partners, my bosses, new to patent litigation, sued on the patent anyway using young, inexperienced, unseasoned attorneys in the firm. 3 years later, after billing the client millions of dollars, every defendant won by proving each claim either not infringed or invalid. Then my employer appealed and billed the client another load of money, with a young attorney in charge of the appeal that didn't understand the underlying issues on any level because he was a former teacher instead of patent attorney. It was such a bad patent no one would settle at any point in the case. My bosses were blood-sucking trolls. I quit for these and similar, parallel reasons. The firm finally imploded. It's like a 100-way tie for first place. Spoiler alert, they had the drugs on them. Less frequently, it was a gun. And yeah, let's just say the I have a permit defense for the latter was not something we had to worry about round those parts. You'd be surprised how quickly cases become at least theoretically defensible as soon as you establish any distance whatsoever between the client and the contraband, though. In fact, I'd say there's a systematic bias in juries and lots of inconsistency in the relevant case law about how difficult it is, and or ought to be, to prove possession beyond a reasonable doubt. It errs, of course, in favor of the prosecution. Not a lawyer, but I was a witness to an assault a few years back. Had to get up in the box and be questioned. Terrifying. Anyway, it was on a night out, hanging around outside a club. A female friend of mine took exception to some dude grabbing her ass. Both start slinging insults at each other until the guy decides to sling his fist at her face instead. Right in the presence of 3 police officers, who witnessed the whole thing and arrested him immediately. The guy for some reason denied it all, despite being caught literally red-handed by the POPO, and it had to be resolved in court. How would you even argue on his behalf? Worked in family law in California for like 2 years before deciding I'd hang myself if I didn't change career paths. In CA, the obligation to pay spousal support, alimony, ends when the recipient begins cohabitation with a new romantic partner. A guy who was positively getting fucked in half in his monthly payments came to the office and said he was aware of the rule about cohabitation and wanted me to argue his point in court. You see, his ex was a narcissist she was in love with and had begun cohabitation with herself. Her presence in her apartment should count the same as if there were a romantic partner there. He was bordering on begging me to take his money. I refused. Not a lawyer, but here's the most amusing time I had while being an expert witness to tell the court about chemical risks. Without naming too many details and faking the chemical's name, it was about a small group of workers suing their very large corporate employer for unsafe working conditions with hydrogen chloride. So, I confirmed I didn't know these people and wasn't, or hadn't, worked for the company, said sure, I'll do it and went off. I sat there answering a lot of super leading questions. What is this substance? Is it dangerous to do? Exceptionally stupid action. What would happen if you drank it / poured it over your head? Would you say that hilariously insufficient protection is enough to handle hydrogen chloride, etc. That took about 30 to 45 minutes, after which I had just about sweated through my suit. Even though I wasn't even on trial, the defense steps up and goes, thank you for answering all those questions. We would like to remind the court that the substance in question is not hydrogen chloride, but is, in fact, sodium chloride. Could you briefly sum up the risks in working with sodium chloride? I have a relative who's a lawyer. She worked for a hospital on a wrongful life case that was pretty miserable. Plaintiff had given birth to a baby with very severe congenital deformities. Plaintiff sued every health professional she saw while pregnant, claiming that if they had told her about the deformities, she would have aborted. A quick look at medical records shows that the plaintiff never really pursued prenatal care. She went to a local emergency room very early in her pregnancy to get a pregnancy test, apparently common in impoverished communities, and she returned to that same ED a month later with abdominal pain. The ED doc did an ultrasound on her belly and determined the fetus was not in distress, but he did not do a thorough exam because he wanted to figure out where the belly pain was coming from, not do an organ scan like an OB would. But she sued that hospital. Then she was arrested for check fraud and saw a physician in jail, but she didn't tell that doc about her pregnancy, so he didn't do an ultrasound at all. But she sued whoever provides that healthcare, the jail, maybe. Just a sad case that the hospital won handily. Not me, but my dad's lawyer. My dad's ex-wife decided that they weren't getting on with divorce proceedings fast enough and decided to make a move while my dad was at work and we were all at school. So she locked my little brother in my room, the only one they didn't touch, and called over 40+ people to take whatever she thought was hers. So pretty much everything, including furniture, old music and pictures from before she was even around. I show up to the house to pick up my little brother and it's empty. I don't know what she thought was gonna happen when she possessed many things that were obviously my dad's, like pictures of just me and him, or the computer that he bought through his job at Dell. My dad sued her 3 times and won every time. She just got caught laundering money from the summer camp she worked at in my old Boy Scout troop that her son was now in. Freak her. Interestingly enough, my dad just remarried to a district attorney. I'm a paralegal. Local guy in his 20s decides to go rob his dealer. He got the wrong apartment. When the college girl opened the door, he shot her in the face and fled. She laid there for hours just out of reach of her cell phone and listened to it ring while her mom called. She lived. A neighbor found her. Now she's paralyzed from the neck down and her face is very deformed. This is a small town. During the trial, the jury was shown just how strung out on drugs he was and how he even bragged to a few friends that he shot someone. That's pretty damn hard to defend. He got 40-something years. The girl that drove him to and from the apartment was also given jail time. Guy wanted me to sue the city because the city took too long to bust his neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. Guy claimed his neighbor's house had mice because of the garbage truck that was parked there when it wasn't hauling garbage. He said the neighbor's mice were causing his house to have mice, reducing the value of his house, so he couldn't sell it. I asked him how long he had been trying to sell his house. He said he wasn't trying to sell it yet. I asked him what he had done about the mice so far. He said he called the city to have them get rid of the mice, but the city refused. I asked when he reported the neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. He told me he never reported it. The city just towed the garbage truck after the neighbor was arrested for some unrelated crime, DUI. I asked the guy how he knew all this, and he said the neighbor and him were partners in the illegal garbage disposal business and his neighbor's old lady told him about the arrest and the towed garbage truck. Like and subscribe for more Reddit videos.